The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the most visited national park in the United States of America. It is famous for its ancient mountains and the beautiful views and scenery they provide. I've been scouring older newspapers recently, and I've come across a number of unusual disappearances that took place in the national park and the surrounding state parks. The first disappearance is very unusual, and things get weird almost right from the get-go, so let's get bizarre. The first I heard of Eloise Lindsay was from the Aiken Standard, who wrote an article about her on the 14th of November 1989. Eloise had planned a trip to Table Rock State Park, which of course is around 50 miles away from the Great Smoky Mountains. I'll let the article explain. Authorities have searched beyond the trail marker that a missing 22-year-old Atlanta woman is thought to have gone, but still have not found the hiker who failed to return from a week-long trip. Eloise Lindsay began her hike at Table Rock State Park in Pickens County on the 4th of November and planned to end up Saturday at Whitewater Falls in Oconee County, a distance of 43.3 miles, officials said. Eloise would be reported missing by a friend who was supposed to be picking her up, but of course when she didn't arrive at the agreed time, this set alarm bells off for the friend. The Emergency Preparedness Agency director said that he had absolutely no idea what could have happened to her, and that his searchers had scoured on and off the trail that she was said to be on, but they found no trace of her at all. The authorities spoke to many of the hikers in the area, but none of them had seen her at any time. Unfortunately, there weren't any reports that I could find that talked about this incident in any kind of depth. At least, that is, until she was found. And this is where things get weird. This was reported on the 21st of November 1989 by the Kannapolis Daily Independent. A 22-year-old woman who spent 16 days in the woods before being found by a hunter says most of the time that she was running, thinking men were chasing her. I don't have any evidence, I just know I was terrorized for 2 weeks. This hike of hers was supposed to take 7 days, and she came prepared for that, bringing 7 days worth of supplies. And it was of course after she'd been missing for that week that she was reported as such. Authorities in Oconee and Pickens counties and neighbouring North Carolina counties searched the area by foot, air, and horseback with tracking dogs, ending the search Saturday when no clues to her whereabouts were found. Or in other words, at no point did the dogs find her scent, and 0 clues were found for the duration of her time spent missing. It wasn't as a result of the search effort that she was found. She was actually found by a hunter around 5 miles off the trail and in the vicinity of the end of her planned hike, so she did end up quite close to her destination. On the 7th of November, 3 days into the hike, I felt like I was being chased through the woods by a group of men. Up until this morning, I felt like I was being chased. I never saw them. I never wanted to see them. I heard them talk about me, though. It might be called paranoia, but I don't think it was. The way they kept on my trail for the whole time, I just know that I was terrified for the whole 2 weeks. She said that she ditched her backpack with the week's worth of supplies early in an attempt to speed up so she could lose them. So you know she must have been completely terrified here because she'd effectively given up the supplies that would be keeping her alive. Let's hear more of what she had to say. Speaking of the supposed men, she said, "I could tell there was no good intent involved, but there was no clear indication that they meant to harm me. I used instinct like a deer. I could hear them using walkie-talkies and they were talking about me." When asked how she survived, she said that she would drink from streams and kept some dried apples from a pack. She also stated that she found some stale donuts hidden inside a tree. It was never explained how she found those. She said that she also heard helicopters and did understand that they were probably looking for her, but she also said that she was too scared to try and get their attention because it might have given her position away to the men who she believed were following her. She also said that when she finally met with the hunter, she was delirious and told the man that she didn't know if she could trust him. Thankfully, he was able to reassure her, and he took her to his truck and got help. The authorities did make some comments on her experience. From the very beginning, before the search was initiated, she became frightened or paranoid that somebody was trying to run her down. However, we don't believe anybody was chasing her. Although the hiker insisted that men had chased her along the trail, authorities said they have no such evidence and have no plans to investigate further. Officials who interviewed the backpacker said the most likely scenario is that she became frightened and panicked when she saw hunters, and later thought her rescuers were the same men chasing her. The sheriff added, "We don't believe anybody was chasing her." I can only imagine Eloise must have felt pretty dismissed by this, because she remained steadfast in her position that there was someone in the woods with her, a group of them. During the search, there were never any findings that other people were there with her off the trail. There weren't any footprints that were ever found, hers included, and nothing to indicate that there was a group of individuals near her. I think that the authorities' hypothesis is actually quite reasonable, but I get the sense that she was feeling somewhat gaslighted, because she was absolutely adamant that she was not alone. The authorities suggesting that perhaps at some stage she may have been hiding from the searchers themselves. In the end, it's not really clear at all what happened, and I would point out too that problems began for her on the 7th of November. She of course wasn't reported missing until the 11th, meaning that much of the time that she was having these experiences of being followed and harassed, there wasn't actually anybody even looking for her. So while it may be true that she had mistaken and hid from the searchers at some point, that can't have been the case for the entire duration. There was no mention of her suffering from any kind of condition, and as far as I can tell, she hadn't hallucinated or had delusions before. These kind of health conditions or substance abuse activities are normally reported on. So something startled Eloise initially. What was it? Was she not alone? She said that she never actually saw them, but she could hear them, and it sounded like they were using walkie-talkies. That's about all of the information I could find on Eloise, so please do share your thoughts with me. What happened here? Now, let's move on to the next disappearance. Evangeline Lorimer was 21 years old when she disappeared inside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on the 8th of June, 1951. The first time I heard about Evangeline was from the Hamilton Daily News Journal, who reported this 3 days later on the 11th of June, 1951. 70 rangers and volunteers combed the bear-infested section of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park today, searching for a Cincinnati girl missing since Friday. Evangeline and her father had been camping in the west central portion of the park, which lies astride the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. She went hiking alone last Friday afternoon, her father told rangers, and hasn't been seen since. "We've turned up only one clue since she was reported missing. We found a top coat she had been wearing yesterday on a mountain about 5 miles from her camp." So in other words, Evangeline separated from her father that day and decided to go on her own hike, but something at some point clearly went awry. Also of interest to note is the fact that when the coat was found, the searchers stated it was hanging from a tree branch, which they found odd. The moment they found the coat hanging this way, they immediately called in bloodhound units with the obvious hope that the dogs would now be able to track her scent, except they couldn't. The dogs weren't able to track her scent at all, and never made any indications of which direction she might have gone in relation to the coat. I'm sure this only served to further puzzle the searchers, but in any case, there were no further updates until 11 days later. The Washington, D.C. Evening Star reported that Evangeline had been found and made mention that her situation had confused those searching for her. She seemed to have been in better condition than she should have been, and some elements didn't quite seem to make sense. Let's have a look. Evangeline walked out of the mountain wilderness in apparent good condition last night and told rangers she had spent 2 weeks wandering without food or protection. The nurse was taken to a hospital at nearby Saraville for observation, but rangers said she was suffering mainly from puffed feet and insect bites. They said she showed no signs of malnutrition. This is interesting. You'd certainly think that going without food for that long would show some clear signs. Of course, you can certainly go for that length of time without food, but it's surprising that there were no signs of malnutrition or anything like that. I enjoy the odd 24-hour fasting sessions every so often, but I couldn't imagine how you must feel after 2 whole weeks. Robert White, acting superintendent of the Smoky Mountains National Park, said she apparently was only half lost during the period when search parties were plodding over rugged terrain. He quoted her as saying she had heard them but didn't have the energy to respond. Okay, so some seemingly contradictory information there. It is mentioned in a number of articles that she was found in a state of confusion or a dazed state, so you simultaneously have no energy but aren't showing signs of malnutrition. Also, I'm not sure what the context of being half lost means here, because it seems to me that if this had gone on for much longer, she probably wouldn't have still been with us. She sounded pretty lost to me. Anyway, let's have a look at the moment of discovery. She was located on a little trail winding through laurel thickets in the general area where she disappeared. She told rangers she had decided it was time to come out. I'm so confused. Does this mean that she was hiding, or is this just delirious thinking now? I'm not sure. An unidentified mountain boy spotted her on Hannah Mountain last night and escorted her to a warden station. She was about 10 miles from her campsite, but she said she had only seen one bear. She told rangers she took a wrong turn after she left the camp for a short hike and got involved in one of the canyons. The ranger said her story was confused, but he delayed pressing questions upon her until after the doctors gave approval. Her account was that she saw no human being during her walk. She braved the fastness in a t-shirt, jeans and low white shoes. She had no coat nor blankets to protect her from the torrential rains that fell during the period of the cool mountain nights. Even after she returned, they, the searchers, marvelled that she could spend 2 weeks in an area alone, without food or means of protection against the wildlife and weather. That's all the information I could find about Evangeline. It was a pretty remarkable survival incident, and it's a shame we didn't really get any answers as to what she was doing or what her time in the wilderness looked like. It's thought that she hadn't eaten for 2 weeks but didn't show any signs of that according to the articles. In the end, I agree with the ranger's assessment that this was a strange and confused set of circumstances as to how the incident unfolded. Why did she hang her coat from a tree branch? It doesn't appear she had suffered from hypothermia, and there was rain with cold nights, so who knows what happened there. Anyway, given that there doesn't seem to be any further information to explore, let's move on to the next disappearance. 12-year-old Michael Orbery disappeared on the 17th of March 2007 in Downton State Park in North Carolina. While not strictly inside the Smokies, many articles refer to this disappearance as a disappearance in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park area. Michael's visit to the state park actually came in the form of a camping trip with a Boy Scout group. One morning, Michael had slept in for too long, and when he awoke, realised that the rest of the group had already begun their planned journey that day. There was another leader of the group who had remained behind at the camp for people who couldn't go that day and for those who might have needed to return. The camp was empty for the most part, and Michael grabbed something to eat. He was supposed to stay put, but upon the rest of the scouts' return to camp at around 1 PM on the 17th of March 2007, his friends realised that Michael wasn't present. The immediate area was searched by the Boy Scouts, but of course Michael wasn't found initially, though he would be found 4 days later after an extensive search set up by the authorities. The Sandusky Register would provide a lot of details. A 12-year-old Boy Scout whose favourite book was about a youngster lost in the wilderness now has his own harrowing survival tale to tell after rescuers found him Tuesday, dehydrated and disoriented from 4 days in the wooded mountains of North Carolina. A rescue dog picked up Michael Orbery's scent less than a mile away from the campsite where he had wandered away from his troop Saturday. Just as a couple of side notes, the dog was amusingly named Gandalf, and Michael's father at the time believed that Michael walked away from the camp because he was homesick and was going to hitchhike home. But the authorities, and perhaps the book too, suggested that he simply went to explore the wilderness and got lost. There was a little bit of weirdness with Michael's disappearance in two forms. Firstly, while he did remember some things, he couldn't remember his entire time spent missing and wasn't actually sure how long he'd been gone. He also said that he could see helicopters in the air at times and even knew that people were near him from time to time. He said that as he was wandering around lost, he could hear people and they were calling out to him. He said that he would return their calls as loudly as he could. He was essentially screaming, "I'm here," and things like that, but the searchers couldn't hear him. Some aspects confused some members of the searching party too. It was not immediately clear how the boy was able to survive or whether he put any of his Scout Wilderness training to use. A few hours after an emotional reunion, Kent Orbery said that he still didn't know much about his son's ordeal. What he tells us is that he was on the move. He slept in tree branches and curled up under rocks. To be fair, Kent also said that he didn't want to press his son too much, which is probably a good idea because if there is trauma or hidden trauma there, that's something that needs to be approached carefully. And often, it's best if you let the person speak about it when they're ready. Michael also lost his hat and glasses but didn't remember how or when. Searchers spotted Michael walking along a stream before he saw them. They called his name but he didn't respond. Aside from a few cuts and scratches, Michael was in good health and could walk and talk. Because he had been without food and water, he was carried on a stretcher to a nearby road and then taken to see his parents. In the end, Michael was okay and in much better condition than expected. He'll be around 27 years old now, so here's hoping he's enjoying life because it could have ended very differently. Now with that said, let's explore the next disappearance. I wanted to end on a final incident that occurred in the park that ended positively, and one that also serves as a cautionary tale. Fred Braden disappeared for 11 days in the Smoky Mountains in late October of 2020 and would be reported missing on the 27th when he had failed to make contact with his family. Fred had planned on embarking on what should have been a relatively simple and enjoyable hike, but things went awry. I'll let him explain in his own words. "I am truly thankful to be alive today. Not certain I would have made it through another night in the woods. I had planned on hiking Middle Prong, but heard there was some black bear activity, so I opted to make a right and travel that trail. It's perhaps funny to think about this now as we know the outcome, but at the time it wasn't. Fred took a selfie while enjoying his detour, but after taking the picture, he came to the startling realization that he'd run out of trail. He then turned around and examined his surroundings and couldn't ascertain where he'd actually come from. I decided to turn around, but something wasn't right. I made the decision to follow the creek in hopes of seeing someone or finding the trail again. Fred explains that he did actually find someone this way. It was a fisherman, and Fred stopped to ask him for directions. Unfortunately, based on the information given, he still couldn't find his way back to the trail and got lost again, or I suppose really was still lost. In hindsight, I should have simply asked him if he cared if I waited on him so we could walk out together. Yeah, it's called hindsight for a reason. As they say, hindsight is a beautiful thing as the correct solution becomes blatantly obvious after the mistake has already been made. We've all been there. I think this is great advice too. You can imagine people thinking that just taking directions will get them out of there and home quicker, only to come to realise that they're now absolutely lost. I had planned for rain, but I had not planned for an overnight stay. I found what I thought was a good spot as any and prepared my bed for the night. I drug a couple of fallen logs over to create a windbreak, and another to keep any predators away long enough for me to get a shot off if I needed. I laid in that spot from 7:20 PM until 7:20 AM. Despite being there for 12 hours, Fred said that he must have slept for around 30 minutes or so, which is understandable given the situation. In the morning, Fred got himself up and began to think. I remembered the last thing Andrew said to me as I walked away. If all else fails, follow the creek. I planned on doing just that, but there was one slight problem. There was growth on both sides of the creek as far as the eye could see. I had already butchered my legs the day before and couldn't do that again. I made my way to the creek and knew I would need to find a way to be as close to the creek as possible at all times. This overgrowth proved to be a problem. Fred would fall a number of times and once on a rock which injured his ribs. This of course slowed him down. However, I got out of the creek and started following the trail. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I found the water bottle that had fallen out of my backpack the day before. What are the chances? I knew I was on the right path. Fred began to make a lot of noise, letting off some shots and using his distress whistle, but unfortunately no one heard him. I knew another night in the elements would not end well for me. At this point, I was just trying to live. That's when his luck would change. I heard park rangers nearby. They were making their way towards me on the trail. I have never been so happy to see complete strangers. It was amazing. They were like, "Are you Fred?" I am indeed. I bet you're looking for me." They shared a brief laugh before Fred admitted that the magnitude of the situation hit him as they described the extensive 11-day search effort for him. Thankfully, he was then led safely out of the park to his family, learning a very important lesson, I'm sure, and hopefully a lesson that can be shared with people so they don't make a similar mistake. In any case, I thought Fred's incident was well worth sharing, and I'm glad he got out of that mess alright. We don't get to hear too many incidents like this, where the lost person gets to share their thoughts in so much detail. Anyway, I suppose this is a good place to end this video, and to hand it over to you in the comments below. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around and disappearing on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike. I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day, or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe guys. Peace.